Okay, cool. Hello, welcome everyone. I think we're recording now. It says so, so I'll believe it. Um, so today we're going over like how to form alliances. We're also going to go over context of like what are alliances and why do you need to form them in the first place. With me today we have the lovely Justine, who runs governance over at the foundation. I'm V. I run contributions and/or community and/or both over at the foundation, and yeah, we're gonna get kicked off. Allergene, what's up? Or are you just trying to make a heart? That is the one problem of the emoji reacts is they are right next to the raise hand button.
Yes, I wasn't supposed to do that. I'm so sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah. So the way we're going to run this is just because there is a decent amount of content to get through. So we're going to do the whole presentation. And then if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat as we go. Otherwise, we can get to them at the end because we've left a decent amount of time for Q&A at the end because obviously there's a lot to get through. So without further ado, if you do put up your hand during the presentation, I'm going to gently ignore you. So just drop it in chat and we can get back to you at the end. So, all right, speaking of all the things we're covering, today we're going to be covering the governance context, like what is an alliance and why do you even want to form one? Which is going to go over like the intents, the missions, the RFPs, trust tiers, and the important dates you should keep in mind as we start getting, the season really starts kicking off. Then we'll go over the alliances, so what they are, like what makes an alliance, what do you kind of need, what are the components and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll end off with like, if you've like starting a brand new alliance, like what you should look out for, what you should keep in mind while you do it, and all that kind of fun, exciting stuff that comes with managing a small team. So without further ado, the governance context. Justine, I'm not sure if you want to do this or if you want me to I'll just slide to you, make it pretty.
Thank you. Yeah, I can do this if you can just move the slides, and that'll be helpful. And I'm happy to see lots of people in here. I'm excited to see the alliances that form and the mission proposals. So yeah, basic concept, optimism is a collective. Season 4 takes like pretty major steps forward to making that be a true statement that's happening in practice. So what does that mean? The collective is a group of companies, communities, and citizens that are all working together to prove that impact equals profit. Missions, which we introduced this season, broaden the scope of the type of work that the governance fund can support. And all that work is helping the collective achieve what we call our collective intents. So the intents, the purpose behind them is to align the entire collective around these common goals so that all the work that we're doing is working in the same direction. In season 4, we have 4 different intents. The first one is progressing towards technical decentralization. This is our top priority. A lot of this work is currently being done by labs and through RFPs, so the budget does not necessarily reflect that this is our top priority, but it is. And like how we've described some of the things that would fall under that category are basically developing a rich ecosystem of clients, provers, etc. You'll see an RFP for a ZK prover that we put up yesterday, which is super exciting. The second intent is innovating on novel applications, right? So like building new use cases or experimenting with novel incentive designs, things that don't exist yet or that are like step function improvements in what does exist. No mission proposals will be submitted under intent number 2. Instead, that's where like all the grant applications will fall. And so the Grants Council essentially manages this intent and processes grant applications that are focused on that. The third intent was suggested by the community and synthesized by the foundation, and that is to spread awareness of optimistic vision. So this includes, I think like one of the ultimate goals of this would be onboarding new people, DAOs, builders, and partners who are passionate about, aware of, and passionate about our vision and values. So there are a lot of people that don't understand what we're trying to build at Optimism beyond just this layer 2 network, right? It's this whole economic system, dual house governance structure, etc. So making people aware of that. And then the fourth and final intent for the season is governance accessibility. And so this is pretty broad and there's lots of room for the community to help with this intent. It's everything from educating the community about governance and RetroPGF to making it easier to find information, easier to understand, creating better UI and UX for people that are trying to interact with governance or creating a more welcoming governance community. So that one's pretty broad. Okay, we have two types of missions, and I know that we're like being imprecise in the way that we're throwing some of these terms around. So we have what we call proposed missions or community missions. That's what we're talking about today in this workshop. We also have what we call foundation missions. Another term that we use for that is RFP, which stands for request for proposal. They both are working towards intents, just in different ways. So a community mission, anybody can submit a community mission proposal, and it's kind of up to alliances or the people submitting these proposals to decide what initiatives they think best achieve these intents. It's like a choose your own adventure option, basically. So if you can think of the intent as the target, and the missions are like the different paths that different arrows could take to get there. Your mission proposal needs 4 delegate approvals before it can move to a vote. Mission proposals will be rank ordered essentially by they'll actually be approval ordered, but that difference doesn't really matter. By the token house once every, well, for now, for season 4, but eventually probably at a cadence that looks like every 6 months. So they'll be rank ordered by order of priority until the budget for that intent runs out. Mission proposals are meant to request funding for a specific initiative and not for a team per se. So it needs to be a specific thing that the team is going to do from start to finish, where at the end of the season, I can like look at the output and say, this can be marked done, right? This was achieved or accomplished. You can request a grant for any amount for your mission, so long as it corresponds to what we call the trust tier of your alliance. And so that's on the forum and probably linked in this presentation somewhere, but it basically, there's 4 different levels right now determined by the work that you've done in the past for Optimism that allow you to request different amounts of funding. So if you've never done work for the collective before, that's great, and we're glad you're here. You can request up to 100K OP. If you're like someone that works at the foundation or you're an elected council member, you can request more OP. Basically how that works. Go back to the previous slide. The foundation missions or the RFPs are different. Those are right now only created by the foundation, and those are like pre-specified missions, like things that the foundation would like to see built that we think work towards these intents that anybody can apply to complete. So they're pre-specified pieces of work with a grant attached, and you again can apply so long as you qualify for the trust tier that the RFP or foundation mission has been issued at. The applicants will be selected by the Optimism Foundation. The fund and the reason that is the funding for RFPs or foundation missions comes from the partner fund and not the governance fund. At the bottom, this is important. All grants in the collective have a 1-year lock on the OP, which will be paid out so long as the critical milestones, which you as a proposer will identify yourself and define yourself, are met. The reason, yeah, it's, sorry, I'm trying to let people in, I'm hitting on, but it's doing weird things. The reason they're locked is because OP is a governance token, and the main point of the grant is for incentive alignment, not funding operational costs. If you desperately need upfront cash to build the thing that you're applying for the grant for, you can check a box on your application that says you would like to be considered for a small upfront cash grant. You can also be, you would also be a good candidate for retro PGF if the impact of what you create or what you execute on goes above and beyond what you put in your proposal. Okay, so what does like a quote good mission proposal look like? Mission proposals are meant to support a specific initiative that can be completed start to finish by end of the season. I know I keep saying this over and over again, like a broken record, but it's different than what most other proposals look like. And so not everybody, it's just a new concept that people need to learn. So the example I like to use for this is, let's say you could have a proposal that would be ship bedrock, right? That is like a start to finish I can check that done. I know when that's happened, the work is complete kind of, well, sort of work is complete kind of thing. It's not provide vague developer services for the next 12 months. And I'm not really sure what the tangible outcome is. And that certainly can't be completed in the next, within this season, because the season is not 12 months long. So it's requesting funding for discrete pieces of work that can be marked down by the end of the season. They're really not meant to support ongoing services or serve as a hiring mechanism for full-time DAO contributors. We're not there yet in our development. We'll get there at some point, but it's not right now. They need to, the second component of this is like one, understanding what we're talking about when we say mission. And then the second part is making sure that we identify clear, measurable milestones toward completion. So there is a distinction to make between a critical milestone and all the other milestones. Critical milestones basically define if you use best efforts to complete the proposal or not. If you don't meet your critical milestone, the token house can claw back your grant. So it's very important that you be thoughtful about how you define the critical milestone, because there is like a consequence for not meeting that. Seasons, sorry, I'm seeing a question in the chat. Seasons vary in length. Season 4 is tentatively scheduled to end September 20th. You'll define other milestones, and you'll define milestones for the token house to be able to track your progress. In this presentation, we suggest that you provide kind of monthly updates to let people know, like we're working on this, we've achieved our first milestone, our second milestone, and so on and so on. And then you should also define what we're calling like KPIs, or kind of like how you would describe the impact that goes kind of above and beyond those milestones, so that when we do have a retro PGF round, it's very clear for badge holders, which may have less context on what's going on in token house or the work that you're doing, to understand the impact that you provided in that information candidacy for retro PGF, which is very important. Just where I pass it to you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I think some of my slides got out of order, but we'll go back. We might have to back and forth a little bit in a bit. Okay. Anyway, so alliances, right? So now that you understand like what a mission is and kind of how it fits into the governance, an alliance is the people that actually complete the mission, right? So if you're writing a mission proposal, the alliance is the team that you build to go and actually do that proposal, right? So alliances can be individuals, it can be a group, it can be a pre-existing team. If you already have a product team that builds stuff and you want to come build something on Optimism, like you can do that. It doesn't have to be a brand new team. So alliances is really just the word we're given to the people who complete the missions, right? There's also an alliances space set up in Discord. It's already live and like beautiful and filled in with all the RFPs that are already up that you can go. We'll get to more of that in the like team formation slide about like how to actually find people if you need to find people. But yeah, so if you can find the existing RFPs and missions in that channel, you can use it to find members. You can use it to find alliances who want to join. You can get feedback from delegates. Ideally, you keep it a little bit like short and sweet there. Like proper feedback from the delegates will go in the governance forum. And yeah, and it's really a space for you to talk with other community members rather than directly with delegates. Yeah. Go ahead.
The reason we're introducing a new term for this alliance is to signify that it's like a group that comes together or works together to achieve this mission. It doesn't necessarily exist forever, but this group works together to complete this mission. And it can be it can be an individual. It doesn't have to be a group, and it can be a group of contributors or community members that come together just to do this one thing. It can also be like a project or a protocol that does work together and has its own business, but it's going to interact with the DAO to complete this mission.
And then very briefly, I think we touched on the trust tiers, but these are all of the trust tiers. So we have Ember, Fledgling, Eagle, and Phoenix. And really, these are just defined by how much work have you done for the DAO previously. So Ember means you've never done work for the DAO before. Fledgling means you've done some work or you've received some retro PGF funding, anything like that. Eagle is you've done repeated work and you've received a decent amount from retro PGF. And then the Phoenix tier is, of course, like you've worked lots for the Optimism Collective, you've got lots from retro PGF, you're in a council, a core developer, received funding from the partner fund, an employee of Labs or Foundation, and strategic partners. And just like, I'm going to repeat this a lot, but there are a few missions that labs and foundations are putting out. We will not receive any funding from these missions. Like, no funds that go towards a labs or a foundation mission will get paid to labs or foundation members. So just to be very explicit with that, it is also explicit in each of the mission proposals. But I just want to be very clear because I know people will complain if it's not everywhere all the time. Okay, so speaking of all the important dates, so to submit a proposal to the forum, the soft deadline is 8th of June. Soft because you don't really have to do it by then, but the longer your proposal is up, the more time delegates have to give you feedback, the more time you have to get delegate approvals, because that's important. The hard deadline is the 21st of June, as in after that date, you can't submit any more proposals. So get them in before that. And then you need to have at least 4 separate delegate approvals by the 28th of June. These delegates need to be ones that have, I think we've changed it to 0.25, right? 0.25% of the votable supply. The delegates know who they are. If you're not 100% sure, you can go check in the Dune dashboards. All of the information is very public. Again, all missions are subject to a 1-year lockup for the OP. And then season 4 ends on the 20th of September. So your missions work should be done on, before, or around that date. Yes. You can just interrupt me.
That's okay. To answer the questions about this in the chat, yeah, so missions will just be funded in the first cycle of the season, though this is an experiment for season 4. If this continues in the future, we see missions being funded basically once every 6 months. This is a pretty governance heavy process that we don't want occurring every 5 weeks. And also the idea is to have the mission be able to be completed before there's another round of mission funding. And so 6 months seems like a reasonable amount of time, or in this case, it will be less than 6 months, but if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so very experiment. We're all figuring this out together. So I'm sure we'll probably do some community feedback at the end of the season just to see if did everyone like missions? But we'll get to that. Okay. Okay, so now onto the fun bits, the alliances. So what are alliances? Again, alliances are the teams that are actually getting the work done for a mission. Alliances have a few core components. First of all, they need a leader. This is the person who is responsible for updating the collective on how your mission's going, posting the updates, making sure that you have someone to talk to. If a delegate's who is doing this? That's the leader's problem. A mission, of course, you need to have a defined work structure thing that you're doing. It needs to end by the end of the season, and everyone in your alliance ideally should be on board and excited to make that happen. Your alliance should have defensible value, as in your alliance, you and your team members have experience with the specific mission, or experience doing that specific thing. Your alliance should be one of the best suited groups of people to get your mission done, right? So definitely consider that a lot when you're forming your alliances, or if you already have a team, make sure that your team is very well positioned to be actually able to complete that mission. And then of course you need to have a defined team, meaning each team member should have a very clear understanding of what their contributions are, their expected commitments, their expected time. And you should not have any alliance members that are just there for decoration. Everyone should be in the alliance to get work done. You should not have people in the alliance just to up your trust here or anything like that. Everyone in the mission in the alliance should be doing work. Dead weight. This is not, the Optimistic Collective is not a space for dead weight. All right, so everyone should be doing something. Gosh, blessed. No dead weight, no decoration, people. You all have beautiful brains. Let's use them. Okay. All right. So leaders and leadership responsibility. So the leader of a mission is the communication touch point, right? This is really important. If delegates have questions about what's happening, what's going on, your leader should have clear answers and should be available. So in your mission template, you'll see that there's a lot of how can delegates get a hold of your mission leader. So this needs to be very clear. Not everyone has to be available, totally fair. It's a lot to put your public contact form on a mission, but if you're the leader, you have to be accessible to the delegates and the general DAO. So you're also in charge of making sure that your mission reaches its milestones, right? Especially those critical milestones. Otherwise, no one's going to get OP, and that'd be very sad, right? Especially if you've done a lot of work. So making sure your team stays on track and that things are happening at a good cadence. We'll get into a lot of the planning stuff in the the alliance formation section later. Your leaders may need to handle internal alliance disputes, right? The DAO is not going to handle disputes. Like, oh, Timmy said he was going to work this much and he's only worked this much. That is between you and your alliance members. The lead ideally should be like judge and jury, and you guys sort it out internally. The DAO is not handling your drama and nonsense. Like, so you gotta sort your own stuff out, all right, guys? And then again, leaders should be active participants of the alliance. Like, no decoration people. Everyone should be doing good work. All right, external communication. So an alliance should post updates and progress on their mission proposal. So once you've got your mission proposal, you'll post it on the governance forum. You get your 4 delegates approval, which will be posted on the governance forum again. And then while your mission is actually happening, so once you've been approved, you should be posting updates there, ideally at least once a month, just so that the DAO can see what you're doing and how it's going. And ideally, these updates are like objective, they're measurable, they're data driven, like it's very clear, and it's not like a subjective, like we feel good about it, like. So having clear milestones before your critical milestones of what you need to do to get it done, just so that the DAO can be like, okay, yes, you're on track, this is happening well. Yeah. Then clear commitments. Again, like everyone in your alliance before your mission gets approved, like should have a very clear understanding of what they're doing, how much commitment they need to do to like how much time they need to actually commit to this to actually get it done. And it should be very clear. Like no one should be like, I don't know what I'm meant to be doing. It should be a very clear thing before you actually start working, right? As well as the deadlines in which they need to get things done. But we'll get more into the like planning later. But yeah, so the clear commitments should be covered roughly in the what makes your alliance well suited to execute this mission, right? It's like, oh, well, Timmy again, wow. Timmy is really out here. Timmy has a great background in this thing and he's very good at it, and therefore, he's very well suited to it. And then that ties into the expectations of like, okay, well, he's going to do what he's very good at within the mission and make sure it happens in a good, beautiful way. So yeah, everyone should have a clear understanding of what's happening, right? The payout plans. So when you're creating your mission and now everyone has a clear expectation of what they need to do and how they need to get it done and the deadlines and all that kind of stuff, you should have an agreement within your alliance of how you're going to distribute your rewards to each of your alliance members, right? It should be very clear. You should sort this out upfront. Trust me, I have done a lot of hackathons. You don't want to have this conversation after you get rewarded. It will not go well, especially because it's a year after the fact. So you want to have it very clear. Post it in your mission if you feel comfortable doing that, so that there's absolutely no dispute. Again, the DAO will not be handling your dispute issues. So if you do have issues, you will need to sort it out internally within your own alliance, right? So, and again, just to point out, there are some labs and foundation missions. Labs and foundation team members and employees will not be getting paid from any of the missions or RFPs that we put out. So just to be very clear on that again. But yeah, really, like this is very important. You guys need to have a clear understanding of this before it starts, because I've seen the drama that this causes at the end. Make sure you know who's getting what and how much everyone's getting expected to get. So then finally, the handover and publications, right? Once your mission is actually complete, there might be a bit of cleanup, a bit of like organizing, a bit of like presentation you need to do to actually hand it over to the DAO, right? So if you're doing like a research proposal, you're going to need to get all your research into a nice doc, make sure it makes sense, make sure all of your sources are there, make sure it's like easy to read and understand, and then hand it over to the DAO, right? Like, please don't give us a repo with like 50 different pages in it that's like chaos and like it's not really clear what the result of the research was, right? Like, it should be very clear when you hand over to the DAO the value that it brings. Jesse, yeah.
Yeah, it's also like very much to your benefit to do that. Like I said, because this is, yeah, you want to make it very easy for badge holders to understand what you've delivered and what the impact of that is. So the more you can make it that easy for people that have low context on what you've done to understand that you've done this work, again, the better your candidacy for retrofit.
Yeah, right. You want to have a very clear impact as to what you've done. And like the harder you make it for us to see your impact, the harder you make it for everyone to see your impact, right? And then the second example is like if you're building like a product or like an app or something for the collective, like cleaning up might look like making sure that your docs are really clean. Like, how do you run it? Like making sure that this, like you've tested it on a few different machines and that kind of stuff, right? So just make sure that you plan this into your planning of like how much work you need to get done and who's doing what. Is that at the end, oh, Sally's going to spend some time making sure that documentation is clear and that the runtime instructions are clear and all that kind of stuff, right? You want to hand it over as smoothly as possible and it be very clear what the impact is and how well it works, or how well the answers are there. I don't know, for research how you would phrase that. Okay. Oh, this is a duplicate. Okay, well, we'll go over it again. So what you should have is a leader, an alliance, a mission proposal, a plan of action. This does not have to be public, but you should internally within your alliance know exactly what needs to happen every week from now till the 20th of September to get your things done and on time. And then, of course, your updates, because the rest of the DAO is very curious as to what you're doing. So make sure to let us know. Okay. Justine, did you have something to say there? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you could see that I was trying to talk even though you couldn't hear me.
I think.
Yeah, I think it's probably, before we get into the how to create alliances, maybe address some of these issues in the chat. So, right, we run experiments on different structures, systems, concepts, and so the funding or the period of time to do work in season 4 will be shorter than the real idea for this system in the future is that you would have actually 6 months to build the thing, and this is a funding thing that would happen biannually. But we're doing a shorter period now to, again, just experiment with the concept, get feedback. Is this something that we want to implement and do in the future? We want to run a 6-month experiment, right? We need to iterate faster than that. We would suggest then scoping the work to be done so that you can complete it in 2.5 or 3 months. Totally understand that meaningful contributions will take longer to build than that, or many of them, not all of them will, but you could probably break it down into different pieces, one of which, the first step of which basically could be completed in 3 months. This also helps you access higher trust tiers, right? If you do like the first piece in a series of pieces of work that need to be done, then the second piece that you can access more funding because you're building up your reputation. It's also how we instill more accountability in the grants program. We did this. We used to make large grants up front. Now we make smaller grants, and you can come back and get a second grant once you've proven that you've executed on the first one.
Woo. So if you are forming a net new team or a net new alliance, right, there's some things you should do before you do that. So first of all is check out the existing missions, right? There might be a mission that's already kind of doing something similar to what you want to do. And ideally, like the Optimism Collective is a very collaborative and friendly space. So it'll always be better for you to join an existing mission and see if you can help make their impact higher than it is to try start like a competing mission and everyone's just chaos, right? Not that competition is bad, but like definitely check before you post if there's something that's already in your vein or in your interest that's looking for new members before you go and make a new one, right? Have a good understanding of the intents. Before you make a mission, or if you have an idea, you should make sure that it actually aligns with what the collective is trying to do this season. Because like, yeah, the intents are here to make us all focus and aim in the same direction. So it's really important that all the missions are helping to drive those intents forward and like actually make progress towards them, right? And then finally, but definitely not least, is to make sure you have a good idea for a mission. Like, is it innovative? Is it cool? Do you have the best expertise to do this? If it's a cool idea and you're like, I actually don't have the expertise to do this, post it out there, see if anyone in the community does, and you can like build up a team of people who do have the expertise, right? Like ideas are still valuable contributions. So don't like undermine yourself for that and be like, oh, well, I don't have the expertise to do it, so I'm not going to even try. Talk to people. We're cool. There's lots of us. Like, come chat, and yeah, just having good ideas is still a very valid contribution. Okay, so you've got an idea, you've made sure it's like it fits under the intent, you think it's going to have big impact. How do you actually get teammates? So we've created a space for missions to be discussed by interesting community members to like chat about it and all that kind of good stuff. So in our Discord, there is an Alliance channel. It's already up and live. So what you can do is you can go post the idea for your mission. Make sure you select which intent you're under on the tags, that it's mission, and that if you're looking for members, obviously that you're looking for members. If you are looking for a mission, ideally you go and read through the missions before you just randomly start posting like, I want to work with someone. But there is a tag for that should we need it. I might remove it later depending on how much spam it creates. So we'll see, T's and C's apply. But yeah, if you want to post a mission, these are the tags you should have one of these. And remember, missions can only be under one intent, just to be very clear on that. I don't think we mentioned that, but one mission, one intent. Not multiple intents. So these are the tags you should look for. There's already the RFPs that we've already posted are already up on this channel, so you can go read through them. It's lots of fun, and come get involved. So speaking of scoping, as we were earlier, I really recommend if this is the first time you're working for the DAO, or if this is the first time working for any DAO, you should really focus on scoping down. Again, as we discussed, it's not a super long time for like a really big project. So the smaller you can scope it down, the better, right? What is the most like core impact that your mission is trying to have? See how much you can remove to make just that happen. Maybe it's just actually scoping out a bigger project. Maybe it's just like researching how the best ways to do this are, right? Like you don't have to try and build a whole thing in that period of time. So make sure that you've really like scoped it down, right? Also, because the way the trust tiers work is the more work you do for the collective, the higher your trust tier gets. So doing a small project now is not a bad thing. Like it's not a bad thing to have a small project that's your first project, not a big budget, just trying to figure it out and then do it a bigger thing next season, right? We're all here in this together. We can build up every season. You don't have to get everything done at once. This is a marathon, not a sprint, right? So definitely scoping down, big thumbs up to that. Even when we do have longer seasons, I would still scope down because everything always takes longer than you think it will. So sprint planning, if you have never run a team before, I would definitely recommend you go watch some YouTube videos about sprint planning and generally like organizing teams to get things done in a progressive manner, because it's a lot and it's actually a lot of work. It's much more than you would expect if you've never done it before. So the basic concepts you need to have sorted is like understanding how much your team can get done. If like Justine can only give me 10 hours a week, I can't be giving her like 50 hours a week of work to do, right? So understanding how much each of your team members can get done, understand their strengths and weaknesses. I know Justine is a kick-ass researcher. I would give her a research project. I'm not going to give her a coding exercise. That would not be a good use of her skills, right? So understanding strengths and weaknesses, assigning a reasonable workload to each member. Ideally, you're actually just a little bit less than their like actual capacity because things always take longer than you expect. And then the final thing is managing your backlog, right? Every week, there's probably going to be some tasks that don't get finished, right? And if you don't keep track of the tasks that are not getting finished, what's going to happen is at the end of the 2 months, you're going to be like, oh my God, there's 50 things we never got done every week, and they've just built up, and now we're like very far behind. So every week or every 2 weeks, you should have a meeting with your entire alliance, like a quick little stand-up, where you just go over what didn't we get to do last time, what do we need to reprioritize, maybe you need to rescope down, and just make sure that you're reaching your critical milestones when you do rescope, so that you're actually staying on track and getting things done in a timely manner, because we don't want anyone to fall behind. That's a horrible feeling, okay? So definitely keep track of the tasks that are falling out of scope. And you might someone gets sick, and then you need to reassign how much work they can do. So just like really keep an eye on your tasks. So expectation setting. I know I've said this a lot, very broken record, but it's a good record, okay? Like everyone should have a clear understanding of what they need to do and how much time they should be spending doing it, right? So how much they need to do, how much like the split is going to be between everyone, what can happen if they can't complete their work. And I like to, I used to be a serial hackathon, if you couldn't tell, but what I like to do is I like to have two paths of like, I can't do my work, right? The first one is if someone gets sick or like there's like something massive happens in their life, right? Like a reasonable like life happens kind of moment. You should have a plan for that. And then you should also have a plan for like, I was just feeling lazy and I didn't do my work. And that's a whole different type of not doing your work to like, someone in my family died or something like that, right? So just having that and having the whole alliance agree on that beforehand will help a lot with like not having to do that conflict resolution after the fact. You don't want to do that, trust me. So for the last time, I promise I will say this. The DAO will not do your conflict resolution. If you do not have answers to this, that is between you and your alliance. The DAO is not going to help you sort that shit out. Please sort it out yourselves. Have it sorted before we start, ideally. And yes, I promise that's the last time I'm going to say that. Because, oh, my button broke. Oh, okay, it really broke. Okay, because it's time for Q&A. So, for the lovely people here live, you can drop it in chat or you can raise your hand and unmute and ask. Otherwise, for the lovely people watching this recording after the fact, we have an Alliances Guide governance forum post where you can go and answer questions, and I'll keep an eye on it for the next week to make sure we have answers. And without further ado, Michael, what is up?
Hey, I asked this question a little bit earlier in the chat, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So if someone is planning on hiring a contractor for a specific piece of their project, like they're building a website and they just don't have the design skills, but they think that they can track that out, should that be reflected in the proposal, or is it, since it's not technically an Alliance member, but it's coming from one of the Alliance members, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I'll definitely let Justine tackle this a little bit if she wants to, but I think you should definitely mention everyone who's doing work, even if they're not an Alliance member, or that the fact that you will be outsourcing that work.
Yeah, I think you can basically say we need this much OP to execute on this component, and we're going to outsource that component to XY projects.
Cool.
Brica? Or Bricia?
Yes, Christian. I have 4 questions. So first, like, is there a way to confirm your trust tier level? The second one is that what happens if a mission is not done by September 20? The third
okay.
one, okay.
Oh, wow. Okay, hold on. Let's go one at a time. That's a lot of questions.
Yeah,
So
okay.
the first one for your trust here, if you're not sure, it's probably Ember, but maybe what we can do is I can start an additional thread on the Discord posts so that people can ask those specific questions, because it will be like an individual thing. But if you're not sure, it's probably Ember, but we can definitely have a conversation about that. And then your second one? Oh, sorry, go Justine.
Yeah, so these are just socially enforced right now. We're again testing the concept, criteria are very MVP, whatever. In the future, maybe these are based on attestations, and there's a on-chain way to verify what tier you're in, et cetera, et cetera. But for now, they're guidelines and socially enforced.
Okay. The second one is what happens if a mission is not done by September 20?
So I think it probably depends on if you've met your critical milestones or not. Like, yeah.
Like,
yeah. So, yeah, a few things. I mean, there can be like extenuating circumstances that come up that are not foreseeable and whatever. So the biggest thing is to just be communicating that on the forum, on your proposal somewhere. Even if you didn't miss the critical milestone, but you had a good, even if you did not complete the critical milestone, but there was a good, very justified reason for why that happened, a member of the token house would need to put forward a proposal for there to be a clawback, and if there's an explainable reason and there's been good communication around it, that's unlikely to happen. If that's not the case, and there really is like a failure to execute or just like bad execution or whatever, then it's just basically unlikely that that alliance would receive another grant in the future, basically.
I mean, for example, in the intent tree, you mentioned, for example, hackathons. So there is not enough time to build a hackathon now. What happens if you are planning your hackathon for October 1st?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I mean, basically, it can't be March done by the end of season 4.
Okay.
Right, and I think we know that like missions are going to be a continuing thing that happen in the next season, it would be hard to have a deliverable that falls outside of season 4.
Okay.
Yeah, for sustained, and then it's not a great fit for this season's mission. It's limiting, but yeah, that's how we have to run this.
Okay. So the third one is there is a GitHub like where the RFPs are, but not all the issues are officially RFPs. Can we apply to that issues? And if we want to apply to that issues, will be under a proposed mission, or we are waiting for an RFP?
That's a great question. So in the GitHub repo, which is like an ecosystem contributions board, there are 6, I think, like official things that are marked as RFPs, and those are like fully spec pieces of work that have a bounty or a grant attached to them. There are also a bunch of things in there. I forget the exact term, but it's like a contribution idea, and there are different flavors of the contribution ideas. Those are informal things, that pieces of work that we think would be valuable and would be good candidates for retro PGF. But it's not like you won't get a grant for it. It's not fully spec'd out. It's literally an idea that we would love people to work on. And it's possible, but not guaranteed, that you could receive retro PGF for doing that. Multiple people claim them. It's like it's a much more informal type of.
Okay. And the next question is, your budget have to be in OP or can be in USD or like in a stable coin?
Yeah, all grants are made in OP. If you need a small amount of USDC upfront, then you can check the box to be considered for a small cash grant.
Okay. And my last question, sorry, is like, how will work the thing with syndicate and the co-granting with you as an alliance?
Sorry, you asked how would the co-granting work?
Yes, with
Yeah.
syndicate with you as an alliance.
Okay. So the syndicate, for those of you on this call that don't know what it's referencing, is we have launched yesterday a co-granting contract where you can go and essentially donate USDC and receive an NFT and an Optimism attestation that you're a co-grantor in exchange. And then that USDC will be used to provide a portion of upfront capital for grant recipients. So that's not for missions, that's just for the project, the builders grants actually that go through the grants council, and also check a box saying that they need some help up front.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
I would love to talk to you separately after this if you're planning on running a hackathon. Very interested in that. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna give it a try. Christoph? I don't know if it's German or if
It's Chris. Just Chris.
Okay.
I got a question because you mentioned that batch holders are going to assess those projects later on. Like, what is the connection, and is it like what is the connection between those missions and RPGF, that upcoming RPGF? Is there any direct connection, or is it just to mention that those projects are also eligible for RPGF?
Yeah, so I think like the scope for Retro PGF 3 hasn't been announced yet, but the thought is that like anything that's building that's like helping to build the collective should be considered for Retro PGF. And part of what we're trying to do with this structure is like bridge start to instill the concept of like this transition that will happen over time, where like in the beginning maybe you need some grant funding, some more certainty around your scope of work and the timing of reward, and you'll get like a little bit of retro PGF if your impact exceeds that, and then over time the ratio shifts more towards retro PGF. So we're trying to like bridge these two funding mechanisms kind of for the first time, but we can never guarantee anything because it's up to the badge holders.
Sure. One thing, another thing, like I think it was mentioned, but I want to make sure that I'm clear on it. In how many alliances can any single individual be? Is there a limit? Is there any like rationale for what is rational?
Yeah, I don't think that we've specified that. What we have specified is that like an alliance can be selected for 3 proposals, or like basically apply to 3 different proposals, but we haven't specified how many alliances you can be in. We might have some thoughts on what the practical limit of that should be, but we haven't defined.
Yeah, ideally I wouldn't make a team larger than like 5 or 6 people, because then you really start getting into like a lot of the difficulties of larger team management, especially for such a short period. Like 5 or 6 is probably reasonable. But again, this is the first time we're doing it. It's an experiment. Like there might be additional things we realize like after the fact, like maybe teams of 15 always get things done, you know? So we might, you know, fiddle with that later. But I think for now, just like a reasonable sized team.
I think what he's asking is like, can I be in two alliances? Can I be in 3? 3 is probably the upper bound on what's reasonable, right? Like I can't reasonably contribute to 20 different alliances. Like,
Yeah, I think it definitely also depends on your capacity. You know, if you're full-time working on missions, maybe you can accomplish 4 or 5 because you have the time to do that. But if you have a full-time job, probably 1 is already going to be a lot. So yeah, definitely your capacity. We don't have any hard limits, but yeah.
I was asking rather in terms of like we will be evaluating those alliances soon, and should we like take it into account if somebody is in like 5, and should this person, you know, should he choose which alliance should he? Because I can imagine that somebody is like in 5 alliances simply placing his bets on many different missions because not all those missions will pass. How should we approach something like that when assessing those alliances?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, so from the delegate side, like actually assessing those, I think reaching out to that individual and being like, hey, are you working on these full time? Like, do you actually have the capacity to do 5 missions, or are you just trying to hedge your bets? Because as I said earlier, you know, we're not looking for any decoration alliances here. Like everyone should be really contributing. So I think definitely for now, especially as this is the first time, a bit of a case-by-case basis where you're like talking to that individual, being like, oh, you're doing this full time. Okay, maybe you can actually do the 5. Or if they're doing it part-time, then be like, hey, I don't think this is a good idea. You know, like you're going to detriment the mission by not being able to actually work. But definitely, I think for now, because this is the first time we're doing this and it's all a grand experiment, definitely case-by-case basis of just reaching out to those individual people and being like, hey, can you actually do this, or are you just trying to hedge your bets? Because we're not looking for decoration people. All right, next up. I think we have time for like 1 more, so finish this off. What's up?
This is my turn?
Yeah, it's your turn.
Awesome. Wanted to kind of like follow up on Bricia's question regarding something that's kind of like out of scope of the season. So if something can be completed within the season, but continues beyond the season as well, how does that get assessed? Veronica, we briefly talked about that yesterday, but I just wanted to bring it up. Maybe some other people are interested, but also curious to hear if you had any kind of like more information on that. So let's say I start something which is a continuous project and it ends, like the critical milestone is hit within the season, but then it continues beyond the scope of the season as well as a project. Is that valid for retro PGF, or is there any other funding mechanism?
I see. Okay. So I think the design behind these missions is that they are a completable project, right? It should be something that you can finish within the season. However, some completable projects might have things that you could like do on top of or above and beyond those projects, right? So if you were to say, you know, like just to put an example to it, so it's like a little bit more like understandable, right? Like let's say I'm going to build a front end for the delegates, right? And during the season, I build this front end and it's beautiful and it's nice and everyone loves it. But afterwards, I realized like, oh, there's some additional features I could do. So I just go in and like add them and that kind of stuff. That would be completely outside of the scope of the mission, right? The mission is done and it's over. That might qualify you for retro PGF. You know, it should the badge holders think like, oh yeah, you really had impact above and beyond. But it's definitely not a guaranteed thing. And if you're serious about doing it long term, maybe the way to do it would be to run a mission for this season that's like compact and finishes at the end of the mission, and then next season, once it's a bit of a longer time frame, then come in with like a much bigger scope of the same mission to like, you know, go above and beyond. But ideally, all of the missions are not ideally. All of the missions should be finishable at the end of the season. And if you continue working on them out of, you know, the love and passion of your own heart, that's fantastic. Definitely not guaranteed to get you retro PGF funding though. So it's more of a like you're doing it out of the goodness of your impact, and it should retro PGF see that impact, you know, then it can go on. But ideally, it's a finishable thing.
Okay, perfect. And second question is, an individual can be up to like work on 3 missions at the same time, which I think also to kind of like dip into the conversation you had with Chris before, if an individual can work up to 3 missions, then that should also be the limit for the alliances he can be in, right? Since each alliance works on a mission, then 3 alliances should be the limit of the alliances a person can be. But regardless of that, that's my understanding. Should the missions that an individual is, let's say I'm interested in working on 3 missions, should those be under the same intent, or you can have missions in different intents that you're part of?
Yeah, you can be part of mission. You can submit missions under multiple intents.
Mhm.
The question about the limit on alliances. So I'm just use Agora as an example because we've worked with them before. The 3 missions per alliance is to limit, like, for whatever reason, Agora getting approved for like 8 mission proposals, right? But in the case where you have membership that's actually like changing in the missions, it's a little bit less clear cut on that like 3 rule. So you have many derivatives of like different groups of people working together and these more informal alliances. So I think it's like your capacity limit. On the question before, there's like kind of 2 separate things. There's one, which is like impact above and beyond what's scoped in the mission or what is expected. And that's what like retro PDF should correct for, right? That's like this impact equals profit, and if you provided more impact than was expected, you should be rewarded via retro PDF. There's a separate question, which is like a scoping question. And so basically, like, if you have a piece of work that's going to take more than 2.5 months, or let's call it 3 months, you can probably break it down into like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and apply for phase 1 in season 4, phase 2 in season 5, phase 3 in season 7.
Got it, perfect. And my last question is, when do the work on the mission actually starts? Is it at the end of the mission proposal like review period, or at the voting period?
Once it's been voted on, you should start working. Ideally, you don't start working before that because it's not even approved yet.
Yeah.
So wait for it to get approved.
All right. So the voting period refers to the ranking, or the voting for the proposal to pass, like delegates.
The ranking is voting for the proposal to pass. So yeah, I think that's the 8th. Oh God, I had it on a slide somewhere. But yeah, I have to run. So if you guys have any other questions, I will be monitoring this thread. So definitely go post there and I'll answer. But I'll also just make sure, I think all of the dates are in the Discord channel. So if you're not sure, just go check the Discord channel out. All right, thanks everyone for coming. This was amazing. It was lovely to see all of you. I hope this helped and actually answered some of your questions. If there's any leftover, please do pop them in that thread. I will be monitoring it and answering it. Otherwise, I'll see you in the Discord, or I'll see you in the governance thread. So fantastic, and have a great day, great weekend, and stay up.